Well, hello there. Once again, this is Pastor J.D. Hatfield of the Riverside Christian Fellowship in Hernando, Florida. As always, you can find us on the web at voiceofvision.org. 2 Corinthians 2, 1 through 4 says, "For I made up my mind not to make another painful visit to you. For if I cause you pain, who is there to make me glad but the one whom I've pained? And I wrote as I did, so that when I came I might not suffer pain from those who should have made me rejoice. For I felt sure of all of you, that my joy would be the joy of you all. For I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart, and with many tears, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you." Life is messy, and ministry is messy. You can look at this text as well as looking at your own life, and you know there's a lot of emotional ups, downs, and all arounds that are involved in relationships, especially when it's someone you really love. People are complex creatures, and problems are often more dynamic than you might think. We're all dealing with our own sins as well as having to deal with the sins of others. Now, the Apostle Paul had first been in Corinth building up the church for about 18 months. And then a few years later, he wrote them the letter that we call 1 Corinthians. After that, he made the painful visit we read about here in 2 Corinthians 2, verse 1. And then, instead of visiting them, as he had said in the book of 1 Corinthians that he would, he decided to write them another letter, as you read here in verse 3 and 4. Now, because of this, Paul had been accused by some of being fickle, unstable, and corrupt. So Paul's explaining himself and says he didn't visit them yet because it would have been too soon. It would have been too painful for them and him. It's a lot of messiness, and God uses Paul's experience with messiness to give you an example of how to navigate the messy waters of life and ministry. And Paul's love for the Corinthians served as his compass in leading them to God. And to help you see that, we're going to examine this text under three headings. 1, love feels pain. 2, love endures pain. And finally, love is worth the pain. Again, love feels pain. Love endures pain. Love is worth the pain. So first then, love feels pain. These verses show that Paul knew his letters and his visits had been a painful experience for the Corinthians. Verse 1 again, "For I made up my mind not to make another painful visit to you." And you know, he felt their pain too. Verse 2 says, "For if I cause you pain, who is there to make me glad but the one whom I have pained?" And verse 3, "And I wrote as I did, so that when I came I might not suffer pain from those who should have made me rejoice." Paul is expressing and experiencing empathy. A real loving relationship has empathy. Love cares, and it will listen to and feel the pain of others and what they're going through. Paul cared about the pain he knew his visits and his letters were causing them. And it caused him pain as well, the pain of having to deliver a rebuke and the pain of the results of that rebuke. But a rebuke was the right thing to do. And love is willing to do the right thing, even when the right results might take some time. Paul was willing to be misunderstood for the sake of his love for them. In 2 Corinthians 12:15, Paul says that he's willing to pour out his life for the sake of their souls, even if it means that when he loves them more, that they love him less. So Paul knew his actions may have seemed unloving at first, but he also knew that they would come to realize his love for them as he shared his heart. He didn't just resign himself to say in his heart, I know I'm doing the right thing and it doesn't matter what they think. No, Paul was also weeping, like a parent that has to discipline its child. And it weeps because of the pain the child feels, but it knows it must administer the discipline to help the child. And love is willing to listen and to weep with those that weep. And love is ready to share, to allow others into their own sorrows, to allow others to listen and to weep with them. Love doesn't simply pretend that it's strong and doesn't ever let anybody see it cry and tell others just to grit its teeth, grit their teeth, bear it, that's the way it is. No, love feels the pain of others, and love shares its pain with others. It hurt Paul to have to see them hurt, even if it was for their own good. It hurt Paul not to be able to give them relief until they were ready. He felt their pain, and he wanted them to know his pain too. So that's the first point. Love feels pain. Love has empathy. But just because you feel someone's pain doesn't mean you're really loving them as Paul loved the Corinthians or as God would have you love others. And that brings us to our second point. Love not only feels pain, love endures pain. It doesn't just feel it and say, "Oh no, that's it, I'm done with you." Love endures the pain. Because he was being falsely accused, Paul felt pain from them. Because he didn't seem to be keeping his word, Paul felt the pain that was in them. They thought he was being fickle, unstable, corrupt, and so they were transmitting that pain, and he could feel it. They were experiencing pain, and they were giving him pain. But Paul was willing to endure the pain because he loved them. Now, even so far as we've gone in this lesson, you can apply that to so many relationships in your own life, and you do. There are people that you will endure the pain for because it's worth it because of your love for them. Look at verse 4. I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart and with many tears. That's a lot of pain. Love is realistic, and that means messy and painful. But love is also rejoicing in the midst of the realistic, even when it is messy and painful, because love endures the pain for the sake of loved ones. Paul knew that God was going to reconcile him and the Corinthians, and that they'd rejoice together. As he says in verse 3, I felt sure of you all that my joy would be the joy of you all. What's the secret? What's really going on here? Something you need and I need. Paul had learned to process the pain through love. In verse 4, he says that he wrote, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love I have for you. Learn this. If you don't learn to process pain, you'll wind up transmitting your pain on others instead. Hurt people will hurt people, but love heals. Even if love is difficult, love endures pain. Love knows that learning to trust God in and through the pain is worth it because love will heal your wounds even if they leave scars. And that brings us to our last point. Love feels pain. Love endures pain. And finally, love is worth the pain. So why was Paul able to process the pain that the Corinthians were laying on him? How was he able to process the pain of having to feel their pain and having to deal with the ministry of much affliction, anguish of heart, and many tears? How can he be so sure of you all that my joy will be the joy of you all? What made him think that seeing pain, feeling pain, and dealing with pain was worth all the mess, all the misunderstanding, all the lament? It was because of his love for God that led him to have a love for them. And receiving that love leads to giving that love. Love is worth the pain. And the cross of Christ is the proof. Think of Jesus on that cross, dying for the sins of the world. Think of his sinless life, how he helped and healed so many, yet there he was being killed. He allowed himself to go through that pain because of his love for his Father and for you. He felt your pain as no one else ever could, including yourself, fuller and deeper than anyone else who will ever live. Jesus felt the pain, and he endured the pain and punishment for sin for the sake of your soul. He knew what he was getting into. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, it says the anxiety was so much it caused him to sweat great drops of blood. But he knew it would be worth it. It says, for the joy, the book of Hebrews 12, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. So he stayed the course, and he went to the cross, and felt the pain, suffered the punishment, endured the shame, dealt even today with the misunderstanding, shared in your grief, and took your place, taking your sin, and giving you his joy in its place, because of his love. In 2 Corinthians 2, 1 through 4, Paul is asking the Corinthians, can you hear my heart? And this text is asking you something too. Can you hear God's heart? Jesus says, I feel your pain, and I want you to feel my joy. I know that love is messy, and sometimes it's very painful. No one knows that better than me. And believe me, love is worth it. Well, there you have it. Life is messy. Love is worth it. The cross of Christ is the proof. Until next time, we'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.